Chapter 2 Little Pear Sees the City. One winter day, when the sun was shining brightly and the frost lay on the hard ground, Little Pear said, "Oh, Mother, I am going out to play. I will take very good care of myself." His mother put 2 extra coats on him, with quilted linings and a cap with flaps over the ears. "Run along and have a good time. Don't fall." And she laughed as he disappeared through the front gate, because he looked so funny and fat in all his padded coats. Even if he should fall down, he couldn't possibly feel the bump. Little Pear ran down the village street. "Come and play," he called to his friends. His friends were all out playing along the street. Some were playing tag and some were tossing shuttlecocks, while others were watching from their doorways. "You play with us," they called to Little Pear. "Oh, no," he answered. "I am going to the pond on the other side of the village. I am going to slide," and he ran on. Soon he came to the house of his friend Big Head. He looked inside the courtyard. There was Big Head with his baby brother on his back. "Big Head," he called, "will you play with me? I am going to the slide on the pond." Big Head was Little Pear's best friend. He was a little older than Little Pear. He had a round, solemn face, and his head was shaved like Little Pear's. But instead of only one pigtail, Big Head had 3. One over his forehead, one over each ear. He shook his head sadly when Little Pear asked him to come and slide. "I cannot come," he replied. "My mother has gone to market, and I am minding my baby brother. Will you stay with me?" "Not now," said Little Pear, "for the sun is shining and I must go and slide," and he ran on. At the end of the village, Little Pear almost bumped into a friendly pig. "Pig," he said, "you should come where I am going. Do you want to come and slide with me?" But the pig didn't understand, so Little Pear ran on, down a path and across a field, until he came to the pond. "This is fun," he thought, and he began to slide. He slid and slid, and the wind came up and blew him about like a tiny ship. Sometimes he fell down, kerplop, but he was bundled up so that he couldn't feel the bumps. "I should like to be a boat and sail down the river," thought Little Pear. "Or I should like to be a kite and fly up in the sky. But it's fun to be a little boy and slide on the pond." Just then there was a great noise, as several boys appeared from the village and ran toward the pond, followed by a puppy. They fastened on some skates, which were flat pieces of wood. Each boy had only one skate, which he slid along on, pushing himself on the other foot. They started across the pond toward Little Pear, shouting, while the puppy scampered and slid at his heels, barking loudly. The biggest boy had a long pole with a spike on the end of it. He pushed it between his legs, and this made him go fast. Before Little Pear could blink his eyes, the big boy had come up to him. "What are you doing on the pond?" he cried. "This is no place for little fellows like you. Go away home to your mother." This made Little Pear so angry that he sat down hard, and he said as proudly as he could, "I can skate too." The other boys came sliding up and circled around him, and the puppy looked inquiringly in his face. They laughed when Little Pear said that he could skate. "You cannot skate when you are sitting down," they said rudely, "and besides, you have no skates." Little Pear wanted to cry, but instead he picked himself up and trotted to the edge of the pond. Then he turned around and said, "When I grow up, I will spank you," he cried. The big boys continued to skate in circles around the pond, and Little Pear started sadly for home. Suddenly he stopped. No, it would never do to go home now, when it was such a fine day. He didn't want to go home. There was too much to see out of doors. He turned back across the field in the direction of the high road. The high road was really high. If you stood on one side of it, you could see what lay on the other side. But after you had climbed up the path to the top of the high road, you could look down at the flat fields on the other side and see away in the distance the small, dust-covered houses of other villages. The high road stretched across fields for miles and miles. It led into villages and out of villages, and still it kept going. Little Pear knew that if he followed it, he would reach the city, and he wished that his legs were not so short. On either side of the high road there were trees. There was a row of peach trees first, and then a row of willow trees behind them. In the spring they were very beautiful, but now it was winter, and the wind swept along the high road and crackled their branches. Little Bear began to feel hungry, but There were so many sights to see as he trudged along the road. He didn't remember how long it had been since he had eaten. Rickshaws went by, with richly dressed people riding in them. Little Pear wondered how the men who pulled the rickshaws could run so fast, because some of them have very heavy loads. In one there was a fat man with several bundles, and in another a whole family riding, and a mother with 3 children. Yet the men who pulled them ran so quickly that all soon left Little Pear far behind. Carts went by, and men traveled with bundles slung over their shoulders. Little Pear looked longingly at the carts and wished that he might ride in one. They were fine carts with 2 wooden wheels and sides and rounded tops covered with a blue cloth. The drivers sat in the open front with their legs crossed lazily and sometimes flicking the horses with long whips they held with red tassels on the end. The carts plodded along slowly, but even they went more quickly than Little Pear. Little Pear trudged along and wondered how far away the city was. Suddenly a man passed him and stopped. "Where are you going, little traveler? You are very small to be alone on this great high road," he said. The man was tall and young and had a kind face. He wore a long blue gown with a black satin waistcoat over it. On the head he had a small round black cap with a braided button on top. Little Pear looked at him and smiled. "I am going with you," he said, "but I am going to the city. It is too far for short legs like you." Then Little Pear looked very sad. "I have never seen the city," he said. "Can I get there and back by sunset?" The kind man asked him where his home was, and when Little Pear told him that was in the village of Shigyu, he was very much astonished. "But that is a long way. How far have you walked?" "We are near to the city," and he lifted Little Pear to his shoulders, saying, "I'll take you with me, and when we reach the city, I'll send you home by a friend of mine who has a cart." Little Pear was very happy. From the shoulders of a tall man, he could see the whole world, nearly. That was a great adventure, and he kept thinking how proud Igru would be to know that her brother is a traveler. Jingle, 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 a donkey trotted by with bells around his neck and gay saddlebags. A man was sitting on his back, and he smiled at Little Pear. "Should you like to ride a bike?" he asked. "I am riding," replied Little Pear as he held tight to his friend and laughed as the donkey tinkled away in the distance. The sun was setting, but Little Pear had forgotten that he should be at home. He was growing sleepy and hungry, but he kept thinking, "I am seeing the world." At last the tall man said, "Look, there is the great city." Little Pear sat up straight with a jerk and looked. There, not very far away, was the high gray walls of the city. The high road led straight up to the city gate. It was a huge archway, and above it was a tower with a roof of curved tiles. As Little Pear and his friend drew near, the city walls seemed to grow higher, and as they were about to enter the gate, the tower above it seemed to reach the sky. Inside the city walls, there were crowds of people filling the streets. There was a tremendous bustle of carts and rickshaws and traveling men selling their wares. Everyone was in the middle of the street, as there were no sidewalks. The shops along the street had open fronts so that you could see what was inside them. There was food shops and basket shops, lantern shops and silk shops, and every other kind of shop you could ever possibly imagine. Lights blazed out from inside the shops, and red and gold signs and banners swung in front of them. There was so much noise and so many lights that it made Little Pear blink. He meant to say, "I like the city," but instead he said, "I am so hungry." The kind man took him to a shop where there was round trays heaped high with steeped dumplings, fresh hot, and other trays filled with delicious twisted bread. When Little Pear had eaten and all that he could hold, he fell fast asleep. Late that night, a cart rattled into the village of Shigyu, and the driver stopped at the first house to ask if a little boy had been lost. The family ran out in great excitement. "Little Pear, the son of Mr. Hang, ran away today," they cried. "Perhaps it is he." And they peeped inside the cart. There, wrapped in a warm quilt, was Little Pear, sleeping soundly. They showed the driver of the cart the house where Little Pear's family lived, and Little Pear was soon safe in the arms of his mother with all his family around him, and as many of the neighbors as a small house would hold. "You were a naughty boy to run away," said his father, and his mother said, he was very naughty too, but I am so glad to have him back that we shall not spank him this time." And they all crowded around Little Pear and asked him many questions. "Oh, Little Pear," said Igloo excitedly, "what did you see in the city?" "I ate dumplings," replied Little Pear sleepily.